Cast. The Oppenheimer Project.
What's going on, everybody? It is 8:17 p.m. It's Thursday. First Dr. Mom episode we have here in a couple of weeks. Hi, Mom. How are you?
I'm well.
So, Mom, the biggest question of the century, are our kids going to have psychological issues, short term, long term, because of masks in school?
Because of masks per se, I don't think so. I think it's more like this. I said this before on one of our podcasts. It would have been much better to not give the expectation that there wouldn't be masks. So I think what upsets the kids is the chaos. So I was on the phone because I'm still doing the telemedicine my afternoon with kids, and they just don't know. There's rumors. Pennsylvania issued an edict that they have to have masks. I think it was yesterday.
Same thing in New
Now,
Jersey.
okay, where I am. Now there's rumors among the children, they asked me today, that by October the masks will be off. And I said
Should be.
this before, I don't understand why anybody would make that proclamation to the kids. You understand what I'm saying? It's not the mask, it's not the on, it's not the off, it's the chaos and confusion and lack of consistency.
But is that every child, or is it something we don't see on the surface, or is every child really going to have some sort of residual effect, positive, negative, whatever, from having to wear a mask in the classroom?
I
Yeah.
so one of the things, let's start about what I think about kids going back to the classroom in general. So they didn't even know if they were definitely going back to the classroom. Again, chaos. So I think for the healthy way to look at things, and I've been listening to the children in these few days return to school, as well as teenagers. Their peer groups, their friend group is disrupted, right? Because people take different positions on the vaccine. Let's talk about the older kids for a minute that can formulate an opinion about the vaccine and
No.
masks.
No.
No, what?
Let's talk about their parents for a minute. What do they think?
Okay.
We're going to connect the dots. You always say that I ask too many questions at once or whatever. I know I'm known for doing that. Anybody who knows me knows I throw like 5 bullet points into a question when I'm asking it. So I'm asking about the kids. You moved it to the teenagers. Richard and I had an idea that, like the show Live PD, we're going to do a show called Live School Board Meetings. So we're going to talk to Jen in New Jersey, who's at a school board meeting about masks in the classroom. Then we're going to take it back to Nashville, where we're talking to Mark. Mark's at a school board meeting, and he wants to know why we can't have the digital learning as an option. Long story short, and I always say this all the time, parents, if you're listening, I'm sorry. Our kids' behavior, how they act, how they react is often a residual effect of how we behave, taught behavior. So what's
Oh,
the deal?
no, absolutely. And not to go off topic, the classic studies in bullying, our bullies come from very prejudiced, narrow minded parents, just like you're saying. There's been classic studies on what is the making of a bully, parents with negative, narrow minded attitudes about minorities, different groups of people. So yeah, absolutely. Kids live and pick up on the attitudes of their parents. But you were asking about the mess, and I was trying to break it down into age groups. So for the older kids who formulated their own opinions, it has torn into some of their peer groups. There's a lot of peer pressure now for kids to think the same way. And one of the big issues is in the lunchroom. Some of the kids I spoke to said, my friend group isn't the same group. I'm not able to eat lunch because we're in different positions about how we feel about the things I said related to masks and COVID. So I think the idea right now is to think we're not going back to school. We're not going back to our friend groups as it was. And why don't we just start that this is a new, fresh experience? So that's one bit of advice. Does that make sense to tell the kids, it's not going to be just we took a pause for 18 months. How long was it? 18, not whatever it is.
I've lost track.
Right. It's not that we took this long pause. Let's think about a fresh new approach.
Okay, so going back to how teenagers are reacting, social media, parents, or a mix of both? Because I can say from experience that when COVID was at its peak, when it was at its highest, when we were all quarantining, my teenager was speaking things that we would be like, well, where did you hear that? And she would try to back it up with a TikTok video. Is it parents? Like I said, so where's that come from? Where they're
Well, some
now
of it,
separating from the friends that they used to have because of their beliefs. I didn't have any political affiliation when I was in high school. My friends and I weren't divided over elections or masks or anything like that. It's a completely different ballgame these days. So what's the big source? Is there one source or is there multiple sources?
No, I think there's multiple sources, but it's 50, how many years since you were in high school? 13, 14 years?
15,
So
16?
15? Did you graduate in 2007?
No, like 13 years. Yeah, maybe 12 years.
Yeah.
I'm not good at math.
I am. So I think a lot has changed. I think the kids are even more savvy in the social media. Would you agree? More access.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So I think it's not one thing. It's the parents. It's the friend group. It's their own level of anxiety. And you asked me, is this going to affect all kids? Well, it's not going to affect all kids in the same way because we have out there vulnerable populations of kids, right? We saw that with COVID. I saw that as an attorney as well as a psychologist because the vulnerable populations are what? The kids with learning disabilities, with ADD, ADHD, all the things we talked about on previous shows, autism. And those kids are entitled to special educational accommodations. Well, how do you accommodate in remote environments? That's been somewhat of a disaster. So we really have to look at our vulnerable populations. If we're in this situation again, can we do better at giving them what they need? That's number one about all kids are not created equally. All kids are not the same learners. All kids cannot handle anxiety in the same way. So imagine for a minute if you're socially ostracized a little bit and all the school is wearing a mask in Unit 1, 2. Let's pretend there's no mandate, right? It's still voluntary. You're going to be reluctant. You're going to be reluctant if you have anxiety to go against go with your own belief if that's going to ostracize you more from the friend group. So what we see a lot in the college students, Ryan, and in the high school students, kids that have more latitude to make their own decisions, a lot of the anxious kids feel that they lost some control because they are anxious. They don't want to do certain things. They do want to mask. They do want to socially distance. But if that peer pressure says you're a coward, you shouldn't be doing this, they're reluctant to say no because they don't feel socially secure. So we have to look at those vulnerable populations.
So with that being said,
Mhm.
Is there any chance for society after this pandemic? If this is what our teenagers and young adults are experiencing, they're already divided over political views, masks, a pandemic. I just saw a meme that said there's 121 days left until 2022, and you're still trying to process 2019, which is going to be 3 years ago in a minute. I mean, we're giggling, but long term, it's a mess. Everybody, I mean, how does society come back from such a long divide, where every day you wake up and there's an opinion, where every day you wake up and you feel like your thoughts are justified because you found the right article that you can repost on social media? How does any civilization come back from that?
Yeah, but look, I spent a good bit of my week's time in work with people with disabilities. And here's my famous saying to them: you're not going to get rid of the disability. You're not going to get rid of the disorder, whether it's anxiety, multiple sclerosis, myasthenia gravis, the things we see, lupus, the things we see in the practice. You're not going to get rid of it. You're going to learn how to accommodate, manage it, and live with it. So it depends on where you're going to put your focus. So has it had a deleterious effect? Of course. Has it made anxious people more anxious? Of course. If people are obsessive about germs, has it increased that obsessiveness? Certainly. But the takeaway from all this, the healthy takeaway, is how to manage that anxiety, how to live with it, how to not pretend all kids are created equal, to not be repetitive, but to look to those vulnerable populations of kids, and to bring more honesty in our communication. Because why are we telling kids dates and things? Why don't we just say we'll take it 1 week at a time or 1 month at a time? We don't want to make any promises. We don't know what's going to happen. What do you think about that? I think that would just right away, if we could just say, we really don't have all the answers. We're figuring some things out as we go along. So let's not count on anything. Let's just be
But
flexible.
that is your piece of advice that I agree with. But I want to
That's
know if
that's it.
working as a psychologist for 40 fucking years and you see multiple personalities on a daily basis, different personalities every hour, is society capable of recovering from all of the divide and craziness that has ensued? Did I use that word correctly? Is still going on. We're still wearing masks, which is fine. The school years are kicking off, and suddenly there's mask mandates. Our parents are freaking out. Our teenagers are freaking out. Our parents' parents are freaking out. We keep quiet at work because we don't want to. Well, some of us keep quiet at work because we don't want to, get fired or end up in human resources, whatever the case may be. But if this is how our parents are acting and this is how the kids are reacting, who's going to tell both parties, shut up, sit down, let's try to find some common ground and figure this out and move on? Or are we going to see society divided for the rest of our lives?
Well, hopefully not. So I want to answer on two levels. So there's a micro level and then there's a macro level. So let's talk about on the smaller level before we get to society. One good thing that's come out of it, because there's always some good. If you say this is traumatic to society, I have a saying that I coined, which is trauma is never good, but good can come from trauma. So one of the
I
good
agree with
things,
that.
one good thing is that the mental health system is just been bombarded. So people are opening up. They're more, would we say, sensitive to their kids' needs, the anxieties and depression in kids. So the mental health system is being accessed more freely. People are uh, less likely to hide the fact that they're having anxiety and depression, children included. So if we can start to change things at that smaller level, that will be good. And I do see that happening. I see more and more access to mental health services. You can't go online and not see an advertisement for a teledoc or mental health services. So accessibility is better. It's been improved. So at the smaller level, micro level, whatever you want to call it, I think there's going to be a lot of change. Now, at the larger level of society, that's a huge question. It's going to depend on who's in office. It's going to depend on politics. It's going to depend on the economy, a lot of factors. Your field was hit hard.
Very hard.
I think it's coming back, though, isn't it? There's a case in point, right? Where
Well,
would you
it's
say
coming.
that
It's
is a
coming back, but it's coming back. But then, what about all the people who sham the people who want to start traveling again, who want to start going to hotels, who want to start going to weddings, who post about how it's irresponsible to start engaging in such a manner, saying that, if you're not vaccinated, you shouldn't be going out. But then the people who were against the vaccination now see that all these celebrities who were fully vaccinated have gotten COVID. Like, it's just, I just don't even know where to start with it.
Well, they've gotten COVID, but they haven't gotten it to the extent of being on a ventilator or being so sick, right? It hasn't been like that. So I can't think of anybody I see personally in my practice who was
Can you tell Lily to
vaccinated,
shut up?
and got COVID to a very serious extent. It was more like a cold. Come here, Lily. It was more like a cold or a virus. So I think, when you say how's society going to heal, we've got to be more fact based. Come here, Lily. We have to be based on the facts, right?
Okay, so while my mom tries to control Lily,
Come here,
Monica first said society
Lily,
divided.
come here.
Social media is an oversized playground of cliches and it's not going to be contained. I agree. In my opinion, social media is a major contributor of the divide and misinformation that shapes opinions. I would agree with that. And by agreeing with that, Monica nor I are saying that you are right or wrong in your opinion. Your opinion is yours. You are entitled to it. We are all going to try to keep some perspective. We're just saying that opinions do divide, and that is the truth, and that's what I keep saying. The levels of anxiety in our students is the number one focus of educators pre and post pandemic. As a society, with or without masks, anxiety of our kids is at an all time high. But I'm going to be the one that keeps harping on the fact or the point that our kids see how we react towards things. They hear the conversations that we're having. They hear us boo the TV when the media says something we don't like, and some of our kids are friends with us on Facebook and they see what we share, or Facebook, Instagram, they see what we share. When it comes to the kids, it's going to be very hard for me to believe that it's just the kids. I'm going to continue to say that the parents influence the way their kids are thinking in one way or another. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're right, parents. I'm just saying that the way we react, especially in this day and age, our kids see it and they will react the same way. Maybe
But it's
90%
not
of the time.
it's not across the board for all kids at all ages. So
Right. Agreed.
right, how a 17 or 18-year-old senior is going to react to what their parents say is different than how a first grader is.
My daughter's
Because
just happy that she can take her mask off. My 3-year-old's happy that she can take her mask off at
Of
recess
course.
and they can play together again. I'm fine with
Oh,
that. That's where, and I don't know, me, if you're listening, I'm vaccinated. My wife's vaccinated. My 16-year-old daughter's vaccinated. Okay. I hate the masks. I hate the masks. I hate the mask. I'm sorry, my 4-year-old daughter. I hate the masks. I hate the mask. I hate the mask. All right. I hate it. I hate the mask in case you didn't hear me the first time. So I was upset that they had to start wearing the mask at school again. I'm not downplaying the severity of COVID or the Delta variant. I'm saying that I was upset that after getting to the point where we could take masks off and we told our daughter that she can go to Target and not wear a mask again and she was happy, I'm upset that we have to go back on that. Okay. I feel better that they're not checking her temperature at the door. She still does need to wear her mask. And she's allowed to take her mask off at recess. And she's allowed to play with her friends, which she wasn't allowed to do last year. They had stations. So, in my opinion, the school met us halfway, if that makes sense.
which a couple things. So it goes back to what I said about learning to live with it, right? So it might be like flu season. I think in other cultures they mask during the flu season. So that I don't know. I'm not an epidemiologist, but it might be that at different times we'll ask people to wear masks. I think that's where it will head to eventually. You know what I'm saying? Like a seasonal around flu season and things like that. But for you and Monica, and now what you're saying is you were telling Jade one thing, you're thinking one thing. So what are you going to do different in your communication with the kids now? That's my message to the parents. Now you're going to say that for a time she won't have to wear it. You're going to make it more as a limited thing that you can't say permanently. Nobody's going to say anything permanently anymore. If they do, that's not fair to the kids. That's my point, because we don't know, right? So it isn't the
But we don't
mask,
know.
right? It's not the mask or the not mask. It's what John Anthony says, unrealistic expectations. We as a society had unrealistic expectations. I thought that from the beginning. I thought it was insane when they said there's going to be a vaccine and everything's going to go back to normal. And
Right,
again,
and that was in the form of a promise, right? I don't care what your
it
political view is. That
was.
was in the form of a promise that if you got the vaccine or enough people got the vaccine, we could all go back to normal. That was said in the form of a promise. Now everybody's going to start chiming in. Well, it mutated because people didn't get vaccinated in time, and this, that, and the other thing. That doesn't matter. What we're saying is that when it was originally said and spoken and promoted, it was said that the vaccine was the key to normalcy. That's the way it was promoted.
100%. And I thought it was absurd because I knew enough science to know nobody could make that uh, proclamation. Nobody could promise that. And that it's much better, as to Monica's point about high levels of anxiety. Truth is a good antidote to anxiety. You have to be truthful and realistic. And wouldn't it have been better to say, listen, we're not sure, but we have the best minds, right, in the nation working on it across the board, across different countries. We're working on it. We're going to do the best that we can. It is only a mask. It's not a hazmat suit. It's
Right.
not the worst thing in the world. We should have told people what I just said. This might culminate in periods of time where you'll need a booster, just like a flu shot. And frankly, I think I don't have all the statistics in front of me, but I do believe, maybe somebody else who's listening knows, that other countries did mask around flu seasons and things like that. I agree with you. They're uncomfortable. I particularly don't like them in the summer. I don't mind as much when it's cold because I hate the cold. So anything that keeps you a little warmer. But in the hot weather, it's nasty. Nobody likes it. The kids hate it, of course. But shouldn't we have taught them to say it's not the worst thing in the world, have a realistic expectation, not this nonsense that it's going to go back to normal. And listen, I'm in healthcare. I was one of the first to get vaccinated in January, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't get over the fact that it's not even a year. Whoever it was in offices, political positions, were promising everything's gone back to normal. You don't even know for a year. You haven't even given it a year. You were promising it 6 months after I got vaccinated. One of the worst things we've ever seen. Are you kidding me? Who could be dumb enough to think in 6 months it's gone back to normalcy? And I shouldn't say dumb enough. It's that unrealistic expectation. We were so angry and bitter that everything got changed without warning, right? Suddenly, that transition without warning, that we wanted to believe unrealistically that everything was going to change. What's your buddy John Anthony say happens when there's an unrealistic expectation that isn't met?
You'll be let down. It creates
And
a whirlwind of trouble.
a disaster psychologically, right?
Yeah.
So now put that on steroids, because what Monica's saying is that's across all kids,
Right.
teachers, parents, everybody, right?
Right.
So that's the math. So when you say to me, hey, Dr. Mom, how are we going to come out of this? Different kind of communication, honesty to all the parents listening. Don't make these broad-based promises to kids. Do my life lesson. One of my skills for happiness, be mindful. Everything's temporary. One day at a time. We would have been so much better off.
So the teacher thinks with the younger kids, we have to be careful with how literally they take your time limit. For example, if I tell Jade we are going to take it 1 week at a time or 1 month at a time, she would understand that as at the end of the week or month. Sorry, it's a little long. It would have been better if she had just come on the show like she was asked to. Would understand that as at the end of the week or month and it's over, so each age group has to be addressed differently, of course.
100%. So Monica, with her educational background, is saying kids have different constructs at different ages. So at 4 years old, before you know it to be 5, Jade really doesn't have a construct of time as Alexis, your soon to be 16-year-old, does. There's different constructs. So yes, it has to be modified. And maybe for Jade, it's today's a mask day, you know?
So now let me
Today's
ask you
a mask
this.
day.
How I have a ridiculous memory. My daughters have ridiculous memories. I think my sons do too, and I'm not bragging. But most kids get upset about something and then easily distracted and they forget about it. So how easily will they forget about how they were feeling negatively or positively about having to wear masks back to school? Are they already forgetting about it because they're outside playing with their friends? Are they already over it because they're thinking about something else? Obviously, we'll have a few kids who just don't want to wear it. Where are they at mentally, emotionally?
Again, it depends on the vulnerability. We call it the premorbid condition. did you hear what your wife said? She said, "Hey, there was a high level of anxiety in the world before." So you're really asking me how traumatized will the kids be? It's going to depend on the impact on their lives if they had special needs that weren't met. Like I said, a lot of the kids who are really being hit the hardest needed those accommodations. I'd like to hear what Monica thinks about that special needs population who really didn't get the IEPs and the things they needed in remote learning and
Right.
now feel like failures as learning. And there's a higher degree of depression. And the parents, some of the parents, and no offense, teachers have been asleep on the job on that issue, really not realizing that we had to modify things for that population. For those kids, yes, I'm very concerned how they're going to get back on track. And now they have a transition to the live school. I mean, if it wasn't for HIPAA, I could show you my cell phone that has text after text of, Dr. J, I just can't do it. It's just too much anxiety. I just cannot transition again. But that's in the high risk population of kids that I'm getting those messages.
Marla says the kids that I know, even the ones that are vaccinated, don't like the mask but accept them and they haven't complained. I think it is more of an issue with the parents. So when it comes to the parents and them being afraid about the masks and the vaccine and this, that, and the other thing, my wife and I both said that if the schools made it so that Jade had to be vaccinated, we would homeschool her. We would figure it out. We would homeschool her, right? And well, you might be asking yourself, but Alexis is vaccinated. She's 16. And I think that perhaps our mindsets have shifted. I'm not sure how we would feel if they said that Jade had to be vaccinated. It may be coming as employers and other things are starting to make sure that people are vaccinated. But a good line from Batman Begins, and as big of a fan as I am, I feel like I'm going to chop it up. He said, what did he say? He said, oh God. It was basically saying that people are afraid of Batman because they don't understand his purpose. And you always fear what you don't understand. And if I don't understand this vaccine, I have a reason to be afraid of it. If the government and our local governors or whomever were so quick to remove masks and even quicker to reinstate them, what kind of mindset should I have about everything going back to normal? Right? I mean,
Well,
where am
we're
I
not
at?
we're not there yet because as to your point, pretty much every day a parent asks for my advice, guidance about, let's talk about children about 10 or 11, 12 years old. What should they do? Should they vaccinate them? I don't have the answer because it's not my field of expertise. And there are hard decisions. For your oldest daughter, Alexis, I don't want to speak for you, but Alexis is interested in pursuing something in healthcare herself.
Do you know what I told her
She,
when she asked me if she could get the vaccine?
I do not.
Your body, your choice. She's at the age. It's her body. It's her choice. She's 16. She's going to be 16 in a few days. She's going to be driving. But that's really where I was at with it.
Okay.
I took a deep breath.
But let's talk about the variables. She's bright.
Mm-hmm.
She's independent.
Mm-hmm.
She is not a product of just yours, her mom's, and Monica and stepdad's opinion. She is not. So change the variables. What if she was 16 and had some learning problems, not as bright, not as socially adjusted, more dependent on your opinion? You might not have felt as strongly your body, your mind. You see what I'm saying? You have to
Oh, yeah. I
adapt
can
it
see
to
that. Yeah.
each, right? You have to adapt it to each child. But my heart goes out to the parents of younger kids. I never had to even dream about such decisions. I direct them back to the medical professionals. I don't know what else to do except to direct them back to the pediatricians, the people in the medicine field, and make as much of an educated decision as possible, right?
Do you ever tell them just
Because
don't think about it?
no,
Why not?
I don't tell them don't,
Why don't you
because
tell them to think about it?
well, as, again, it's a complicated question. So not every parent that asks me is in an intact marriage. a lot of them are in divorce, and one parent's going to file an action. You're going to see all that happening. One's going to file an action against the other to enforce the vaccine. It isn't that simple in a lot of those situations. And even in intact families, you have, like Monica was saying, you have a lot of division of opinions.
Why don't you make it that simple?
I don't think I could just tell them to not think about it because they want an answer. And then what if you said
That's an
well,
answer.
just- okay, but let's
You tell me as a family therapist, as somebody who has studied the human mind for over 40 years, you tell me, what are the benefits of not focusing on something that is worrying me?
no, there's a lot of benefits to not focusing, but while they're not focusing, they're hearing that their cousin in another state at 6 years old got the virus and is very sick. So you see what I'm saying? It's not that easy because they fear is a big motivator of thinking about things. So they're hearing and learning, and unfortunately, we are hearing about young kids. The pediatricians that I know are really worried
You
about
know what I'm going to say? That's something that's probably going to come back to haunt me when I have a podcast empire 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. I'm going to say it right here. And if you're listening, and whether you agree with me or disagree with me, this is my opinion. So just take it for what it's worth. I'm not going to take. If I hire a contractor or I'm looking to get my patio done, I'm going to get a couple estimates. If I'm shopping for a car, I'm going to see what kind of deals I can get. If I'm in the market for a new job, I'm going to interview a couple places and see what they have to say and see what I think about it. And here it comes. And this is the quote that's going to come back to haunt me.
Mhm.
I know it now. I don't think the media or anybody, if you're listening and you disagree with me, I'm sorry, should be listening to just one person, Dr. Anthony Fauci. It's Dr. Fauci this. And you ever notice when they print his name, they can't help themselves. They have to say the leading expert in disease or whatever the title, right? Because you want to reinforce that what he's saying is right. Now, if you're listening, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not into all of that. I don't believe that any one person should be the voice for anything, especially something of this magnitude.
Well, but when you say he's the voice, do you mean that he shouldn't be the public media voice because he works with a team? He's not working in isolation, right? So do you mean as a public figure?
But who
Because
pays
he's-
attention to his team? Who do if
We don't
if
even
every
know.
time we saw if every time we saw the news or we saw a report and I saw Anthony Fauci with 6 other people and I saw them having a discussion, I would bet that discussion isn't everybody agreeing and on the same page. I'm sure some people have some thoughts and opinions because that's a healthy conversation, especially with people as smart as them trying to discuss something of this magnitude. I would imagine that it's not just clear and cut, right? That's
you
what I
would-
want to see. I don't want to see Anthony Fauci speaking on behalf of everybody every single night. And I don't want to see them asking these simple questions like, when do you think masks are going to come off? What do you think about the vaccine? But I want to see them having a conversation. And it would probably make me feel better because I would see that one doctor over there is not so sure. And then maybe this doctor over here is so sure. So he's going to reassure the doctor over here that isn't so sure. And then maybe they start to come to some sort of agreement and they're on the same page. But a conversation taking place. I don't want to keep hearing from Anthony Fauci. I've been over that. And then people use that. They repost Anthony Fauci's credentials. They repost that somebody worked with Anthony Fauci, that he's done this and that he's done that. And I'm not taking anything away from the guy. He's bright. He got where he is through hard work and his accomplishments. But for the last 2 years, he's all that the people hear. He's the only person that people hear from. Sometimes you hear the Surgeon General, but even those two are conflicted, the current and the last Surgeon General. I don't want to hear from one person, period, ever in anything.
I personally admire Dr. Fauci. I think he's in great shape for his age. I think we should all study what he
He's
did
sharp.
for that.
He's
Yeah,
sharp.
he's
I'm not
sharp.
taking
He's
that away.
great.
He's smart.
He looks great.
He handles
But-
all the interviewing and all this interrogations well. I'm not taking that away from him. I'm saying when it comes to this
does.
entire thing, I don't want to hear from one person.
Right. But that wasn't my point. I do like him. I do think we can learn a lot. But if you're saying that it would be better at times to have a panel,
Yeah.
to have a debate, to hear scholarly discourse,
Mm-hmm.
not somebody who's not a doctor in immunology and disease, to hear the real people with real credentials. Absolutely, I think that's a great idea. Why don't they do it? It goes back to my point. They don't do it because why? Because the political parties want to create what? A false sense of we have some answers, it's all going to be fine,
Do you think it's
right?
a false sense, or do you think the government feels this overwhelming need to prove or create the image that they have it under control?
Both. I think it's both. I think that's an excellent point, that they have it under control, that it's not chaos, that it is. But we know it's chaos. We know from the educators, the teachers. So I think that that expectation, because it's tied to the economy, they want to give a sense that everything's recovering instead of what I said, what I say I do with the disabled, what I say I do with people who have anxiety. It's not going away. That's a foolish strategy. Let's learn to live with it. And let's learn to live as well as we can with it. And when you say how are we going to recover, that's going to be the first step of recovery. I don't know. Does somebody know? I don't know if Dr. Fauci ever said we got to learn to live with this, or he more goes to the side of it. We
No,
got to.
he's the one. He is, and excuse me for anybody who disagrees. He is the most anxiety-inducing one out of any of them, because at least Joe Biden and everybody else doesn't say next fall. That's the
Oh yeah,
worst
yeah,
fucking
yeah,
thing you can
yeah,
say
yeah.
on
I
to
agree.
the media is we could see normalcy by next fall, and
And
people are like, "Are you kidding me? This has been 2 years."
right, right,
That's
right.
like the worst damn thing you can say, and then have it printed. Like
And,
he's if he thinks he's helping anybody by giving that as a timeline, he's not. So
and,
I don't
and then
know.
he changes it a lot, because he said by the fall of 2022. Did everybody hear this? And then
Yeah,
everybody
I
went
heard that. Yeah.
and then they went crazy. So then he said, "Oh no, no,
What are you
no."
saying? It's not even the
Right.
fall 2021 yet. Like, what is he saying? That's what I'm saying. And again, I'm going to reiterate:
I
he's
think it's
brilliant. He's
wonderful.
gotten to where he is. I get that, but he is not PR friendly sometimes. I get it. He's a cute little guy from, or is he from the Brooklyn? He's
He
a
looks
cute
great.
little guy from Brooklyn. He's got a personality, but dude, when he says like normalcy fall 2022, people are just like, well, I'm going to give up on everything.
One thing you'll like as a manager is some of the doctors I know people who work with him, and they say he is a wonderful boss, manager. His disposition is good. But I agree with you. When I heard the dates, I was like, "What are you doing, Dr. Fauci? What are you
You can't
doing?"
say that shit.
No, because one, what if it's not accurate? And two, some people talk about anxiety are going to say, "Are you kidding me? They're planning a wedding, they're planning a baby, they're doing this and that." But let's go back to your point about, is the world coming back? But I do think the world's come back somewhat, don't you? It's come back somewhat. People are still planning weddings. The hospital policies are better. We're making better decisions about letting patients have someone in there when they do have COVID. I don't know if you know that,
Yeah.
because you're not in healthcare, but my patients who've had COVID have been able to have somebody in there with them. So the world is slow, or our country's slowly coming back. I don't think we should focus on the masks as a symbol that we're not coming back. You know what I'm saying? Because many
Yeah.
things are picking up, and people are doing what I'm saying, aren't they? They're
Yeah.
learning to live with it, to use good sense, to think they're not. I see people traveling again, but they're masking on planes. They're thinking about places they want to travel. So I think from last year to this year, I see a huge difference. Do you, Ryan? I mean, you're out in the field and
Um,
see people. I see a huge difference from last year.
I see, and I follow a lot of, and this is going to sound horrible. I follow a lot of special forces operators on social media. I listen. That's what I like to listen to. It makes me feel organized, disciplined. It motivates me. Whatever. I listen to them. Don't kill me, which you could. Anybody who's listening, if you are, which you're probably not, the special forces operators that I listen to. In regards to passion, these are men and women who have sacrificed a huge part of their lives to defend this country. And it's not just I signed up and I got out at 4 years. It's a completely different mindset, right? It's that I will defend the Constitution that was written. I don't want to see any changes to it. I feel like governors are overstepping their boundaries. I feel like our freedoms are being taken away. They preach, and sometimes it sounds a little radical. I will admit, but the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes they can induce fear as well. Sometimes,
Like in what way do they induce fear?
if they'll say like, if you're willing to just comply, you're giving up your freedom. And the reason I'm saying all this is because, sorry, I lost my train of thought. The reason I'm saying all this is because I have to wear my mask at work again. I don't like it. I like my job. I put it on, right? I know there's a lot of people that are wearing their mask because it's a mandate, whatever the case may be. Sometimes I start thinking to myself, like, well, like, am I losing my freedoms? I'm conflicted. Don't ask me for a flat out answer. But again, they do make me think like, well, like, am I losing my freedom? Am I giving something away if I wear my mask? I don't know. So I'm always kind of conflicted there. But I'm saying that I see people go both ways with it. And are we giving up freedoms? I'm going to say I don't know. People will be like, yes, we're giving up our freedoms. I don't know. I'm being honest. I really don't know where I stand with that. I guess at the end of the day, I'm like, what do you want to do? Go march to your governor's office then. Go stand there and protest and try to get your points across. Try to get the mask mandate taken away. But if you're not, just posting on social media is not helping. You're probably inducing more anxiety to somebody who follows you, who doesn't know what to make of any of this to begin with. And I think that's one thing that people don't think about a lot, is that there's some people who just really can't think for themselves. And it's not so much that they don't want to. It's just kind of they're not that kind of person, right? Not everybody's a leader. Not everybody's going to be a manager. Not everybody's self-sufficient. Not everybody's a go-getter. Some people just have overwhelming, crippling anxiety. Some people just can't think for themselves. And it goes both ways with the cycle of creating fear is on both ends, and it feels like it's never ending sometimes.
I was thinking when you were talking, I bet there was a lot of feeling like that with smoking, because I was thinking, the problem with the virus and the mask is that it's not really just an individual situation. It impacts on other people, right? So we're
put a mask on Lily. Put Lily's mask on.
It's not that we're asking to take away individual liberties. It's the impact on other people. I was wondering, do you think they made the same argument when they said you couldn't smoke? Because smoking impacts on other people, right?
Yeah.
Not that we're taking away your liberty.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I guess it just feels overwhelming, right? It feels overwhelming at this point. And I think, as you know, a lot of people just don't like being told what to do. But here's one thing, and this is why I'm always conflicted with all of this stuff, because I always listen, I hear something and I agree with what they're saying. I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with everything, right? I'm always mixed on all of this stuff. But one thing I agree with, I forget his name. I apologize. He's actually the founder of Harvest, the restaurants, and he was a very big advocate for reopening PA.
What's his name?
And he said at a rally one night, like a year or so ago, before everything reopened, he said that he's not downplaying the virus, but that we were all told, this country, because he's talking about when the 2 weeks, he said we were supposed to flatten the curve. We were supposed to flatten the curve. We weren't supposed to end the pandemic. We weren't supposed to wipe the virus out completely. We weren't supposed to just, put it all to rest in 2 weeks. We were supposed to flatten the curve. He's like, now you're keeping restaurants closed. Now people are losing their jobs. Now we're just in this mess when what we were supposed to do was just flatten the curve. Now it's just a completely big mess.
Mm-hmm. Which isn't that far off from what I've been saying, right?
Yeah.
The how to live with it. It's not going away. I'm going to go back and look at what people said about their civil liberties with smoking because I think that it has a lot of analogy because it impacts on other people. So not to be melodramatic, but it's something I want people to think about. So somebody I was working with and they didn't want to take the vaccine. They took the former president's position and they passed away on Saturday night from COVID.
Hmm.
And it's always when they're passing away, what do you think they're saying about the vaccine? They're asking for it. They're begging for it. They're saying, I should have taken it. And people need to know that because a lot of people are not privy to my fields in healthcare. They don't know what really goes on, right? And you know that saying, there's no atheists in the foxhole? I haven't seen too many people. I mean, I'm not in a hospital like a medical physician, like an ER doctor, but I speak with them. They're my world, the medical profession. And none of us has seen one person dying not asking for the vaccine. Everybody needs to hear that. I'd like somebody to tell me an experience of somebody dying at 50, 40, 30s, not asking, hey, is it too late? Can I get the vaccine? So that's kind of food for thought, right? Because all of a sudden, when you have the symptoms, now you believe that this wasn't the government making this up. Now you're on a ventilator. Now you can't breathe. It's a horrible, horrible death.
You want to hear
And
something?
so,
I'm not
but
downplaying all of that. I'm
but
not
what
downplaying
do you
that.
think of that? There's not one that doesn't ask for it.
I'm not downplaying all of that, but what I would like to say, and before I get crucified for this as well, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert in any of this. After wearing the mask for, what was it at that point, like a year almost, I had never been more sick so close together than I was this past summer. It was like we all took the masks off, and my entire household for like 3 months, runny nose, cough. 1 week we all got something where our bodies were just destroyed with aches, and we were coughing and mucus and all that. So like, yeah, there was no flu last season and this and that. I get that. We were all wearing masks, and I took my mask off, and I felt like I was sicker than ever. That's just me. That's something that my family and I lived through. But again, it's like I don't know what the answer is.
Did you think you had COVID? Did the thought cross your mind during that time?
We think I had COVID when I was in New York. We think I had COVID when I was
Oh
in New
yeah, I
York
remember.
because I got very sick, and this is before it was even a thing. It was like a week, 2 weeks before Christmas. I got a terrible chest cold. I lost my voice. I had aches and pains. I never go to the doctor when I'm sick. I let it pass through my body. This time I went to urgent care. The doctor said, I don't see anything wrong with you, but I could give you a Z-Pack if you want. And I think there's actually some proof that Z-Packs can work effectively with the COVID. I took the Z-Pack, and on day 3, I couldn't even stay awake. I was so sick. Like whatever was running through my body or being pushed out was just destroying me. But when I got back to work a couple of days later, I found out that like it ripped through like 12 people at work also. So the speed that COVID-19 apparently goes through people. So we think I had it like 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, the woman who passed away, her husband had it and her grandson. They survived. I did see that promising finding that zithromycin, the Z-Pack, might be helpful. I also saw that fluoxetine, better known as Prozac, some of the psych drugs might be
Oh,
helpful.
one more
I don't know
thing.
if anybody saw that.
Some people say, well, why didn't Monica get it? Monica was taking a medication for her illness that actually was apparently proven to defend against COVID-19. So it was kind of just, everything kind of just worked out.
Thank
If I
goodness.
did have it. But yes, people were like, well, how come she didn't get it? I forget what she was taking, but she was taking something that apparently could block it. Hold on. She said, devil's advocate, what about the people who have been negatively affected by the vaccine? I've heard of 2 anecdotes where doctors directly correlated the negative health effects of the vaccine. And then that goes back to what we've been saying is that like it works for some people. Some people have negative side effects. But, and I said this last time, I'm playing devil's advocate now. when there was the reports about Johnson and Johnson and what was it, increased heart rate or enlarged, it was something with the heart that affected it.
Pericarditis, I think they had. But
Yeah. So okay. So tell me, Dr. Joan, how many side effects, negative side effects, are listed in one antidepressant commercial?
oh, a lot. There's a lot if
That's
you
what I
look at
always
it.
say.
But and we see them,
Oh, blood
uh,
clots. That's what it was. Sorry, she's right. Blood clots.
I'm going to go back to that thing about expectations. So again, they said, I don't know if you know what Guillain-Barré is, but you get it often after a vaccine. It's horrible. It leaves you almost like your cousin Greg was. It's like the closest thing to ALS that I've seen. The only difference is occasionally it's reversible. So when the vaccine came out, that was the first thing I said, uh-oh, I hope there's no Guillain-Barré like there is with the flu shot. And there were promises. I don't know if it was Dr. Fauci. I don't want to misspeak, but trust me, I'm an avid reader. There were promises, no Guillain-Barré. Do we have a patient who got Guillain-Barré right after the shot? You bet, as to Monica's point. But there's no vaccine, there's no medicine. There's people who die from an aspirin. So, as to Monica's point, yes, there are some people we saw. The Guillain-Barré is a horrible thing to see, but the numbers are extremely low. They're some of the lowest numbers of vaccine side effects any of the medical doctors have seen. My friends that practice as physicians, my pediatrician friends tell me they've never seen lower rates of adverse effects than with this vaccine. So I don't think there's anything, any drug, medicine that isn't going to have some side effects. Where it's really scary.
Monica can't eat apples.
Right.
She
I
could
was going
die.
to say that. But as to Monica's point, I think where it's really scary is in the younger kids where we don't know the long-term effects. Because there's no, how can there be a long-term study? It's not, we've only been at this for what?
I always say that, like, when it comes to supplements, and you know how many you saw on your counter as I was growing up and trying to stay big and strong. A lot of supplements were just pumped out, and looking back, I could be dead by now because there was no long term.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, I always think, and what defines long term? I think. I always think that, in my opinion, my uneducated opinion, because I only have an associate's degree, is that you can't really put a pinpoint on long term. What if it's something that hits the human body at 50 years, 40 years, 30 years?
You want to hear the joke in medicine?
Yeah.
So in 10 years, if everybody's arm falls out from the vaccine, they'll still be alive with a fallen off arm, but they'll be alive. So that's kind of the mentality. I kind of like that. I hope, of course, that doesn't happen, but you see what they're saying? At least you'll still be alive and have it. It's like Russian roulette, right? It's kind of like Russian roulette with your life. But I think that we've seen enough effects. I'm not going to tell you that we didn't have a few people after they got the vaccine, but I have an active practice, and I will tell you it's probably under a half a dozen people who had a reaction like the Guillain-Barré or required hospitalization. Nobody died from it. Everybody's alive. On the other side, we've lost patients who haven't been vaccinated. So there's no clear-cut answer, but I'm definitely on the side of the vaccine from what I see every day in my healthcare practice.
I'm that guy who doesn't care if you get it or not. If I'm telling you to get it, I'm telling you to get it because you want to get it. I really don't like anybody being told that they have to do something. That's just me. Somebody's going to be like, well, you know, your kids go to school and the chicken pox vaccine and all this other stuff. I get it. But I don't really care if you get it or not. I mean, I got it, right? Because at the end of the day, doesn't it come down to choice? We want to talk about, like, let me ask you this again, Crucified. This is going to be the one podcast that comes up on Twitter that will get me canceled eventually. Is it fair to say that we shouldn't be allowed to tell women what they can do with their body as far as abortion, but then tell people they have to be able to get vaccinated? Is it completely different because COVID-19 is extremely contagious and it could, like you said, affect other people? I guess maybe that could be a reasoning. But when it comes to being told what we as people can do with our bodies, where does the line get drawn? Our bodies. Not that person over there is going to get affected from what I'm doing. Our bodies.
Right. But for me personally, you hit the nail on the head. So with the abortion, it isn't that idea that you have to get to a herd mentality, that you're doing something. If you choose to have a baby or not have a baby, it's an impact on the father, obviously, but it's not an impact on society. So I think that's where this gets really complicated with the civil rights, civil liberties issue, because the impact on everyone else is dramatic, right? That's
I
the
I
problem.
get that part of it, but I
Because
mean when we're telling people what to do with their bodies.
look what happened when we didn't get to the herd mentality. Look at the mess we're in because people didn't get vaccinated. But, you know, a physician said to me that it never works to push the person. Again, how do we cure you? You asked a good question. Well, what are the curative factors? So, not pushing people, but having a conversation, not a debate, not a confrontation. Like I keep saying, having a confrontation and saying the physician has said they have been successful when they say, listen, I'll spend an hour with you. We can go over the research. You can make your own decision. Just make it based on facts. Don't make an emotional argument. Don't make it on what Dr. Fauci said or what Fox News said, right? Or what Rachel Maddow said. No offense to any of these people. Do some reading, do some investigating, like you said. Call a few doctors. And guess what happened when the doctors do that? The people get vaccinated. By and large,
I,
they do.
I was just about
So,
to say I'm thinking about all these special operators I listened to that I told you about, right? First of all, to anybody who's listening, there's this misconception that if you are a special forces operator of in any capacity that you're just some grunt. You have to be extremely intelligent. You have to be in extremely good shape. You have to just be. You obviously you're one in a million cut from a different cloth, right? So they're very smart men and women. I actually was just thinking, what would their thoughts on all of it be if a fellow veteran turned doctor had a conversation with
mhm,
them, and
mhm.
they could ask the questions like, well, what about this? What about that? Like, again, I'm not saying that their intelligence level means that they would agree or disagree, but I could see them listening and then maybe forming their own or different opinion as the outcome.
Right. And I like where we're ending because we're ending on the idea of it's the wrong question. It's not the question if it's civil liberties being aborted or taken away. It's the question of how do we make a decision anymore in this country. So maybe they need to interview an ER doctor. I have a friend who's an ER doctor. Maybe they need to interview her and see how she feels about it being out in the trenches. You see what I'm saying? It's a wrong question. Go get the information. And then if you sift through all the information and you're still against it, that's a horse of another color, but then you made the decision based on facts. You know, it's not a perfect analogy, but one of the smartest things I read on gun control was when are we going to stop saying that it's the right to carry a gun and we got to have that? And when are we going to say the right to having a gun has to be abridged or shortened? When are we going to stop that argument? It's a ridiculous argument. And when are we going to look at multiple factors that it isn't one thing, right? It's not about rights. It's many things have gone wrong in this country that there's such a high rate of gun violence. And I'm saying the same thing. It's not about rights. Go get all the facts and get the information. Do you think and not to insult anybody, the pro NRA or against NRA, do you think they have all the facts on why this country's so violent? Do you think they
No,
spent
the
time?
one thing. Sorry to cut you off because I was going to answer your question before you went on. The one thing I always see, because I do follow a few um, firearm pages as well, is they're never interested in the thought of gun control. What they immediately blast is when a politician makes it their purpose to try and make gun laws stricter, but the politician can't even use the correct terminology. And it's not even a discussion. If there's a mass shooting, a politician takes to the podium, we're going to work on a bill for gun control. Why did we have to go right to that, right? It's not even like a discussion. It's like that.
Exactly.
And then you piss off other people.
Exactly. And do you think that any of them spent a day with a mental health person and said, why are we getting more violent? So
Probably not.
it's not the argument. And I hope everybody has a different conversation tomorrow with people and say, it's not the argument about if we're curtailing your rights. Where are you getting your facts? You're making emotional arguments based on a dislike of the president, a dislike of this country. Get some science behind it. Just like you said, Ryan, get the science from multiple people. I like your idea. I think that would be great if they had collaborative teams and teams of scientists, and you didn't feel like it was streamed just through one person. So I hope you'll encourage everybody to get their facts in a different way. And that's the same thing that I want to say to parents about the kids. To say, we don't know everything, to teach the kids even from a young age. We're gathering information. And the last thing I want to say to the kids, to you with Jade, to all the parents out there, it's about, okay, the kids don't like the mask. So what my question is? What tools are you going to use when you have to do something that you don't want to do? Are you going to get angry and throw a fit? Are you going to learn why you have to do it? Not obviously when they're 3 and 4 years old, but what are you going to do? Because wouldn't you and Monica love to tell your kids that they're never going to have to do something that they don't want to do?
The pressure as a parent to play Russian roulette with my child's life is insanely overwhelming.
100%. But get the facts, talk to the medical experts, and then make the best decision you can based on the facts. Thank God we don't have to do that this minute.
No, I agree. Thank goodness we don't have to do it this minute. And, I was trying to tie Monica's comment into what you're saying about kids. And there's, our kids are anxious. We're anxious. Some of us can control our emotions better than others, which is whatever the case may be. I think that this makes all of this a little bit easier to digest, but not really, because it is still everywhere and it's still in our face. But that's a completely other podcast. So yes, we have reached the 1 hour mark. I think it was a very good conversation. It was supposed to be about COVID in schools, but it turned out to be COVID as a whole, which is the beauty of a podcast. You can kind of just take it a different direction. So I felt like it was a very good, healthy conversation. What do you think?
Get out there and have a conversation based on bringing down the emotion, getting the facts, and telling kids what I said. This isn't about the mask or not. It's about what you're going to do when you have to do something that you don't want to do. Right? Because it's not always going to be everything that you want to do. That's not how it's going to go. So let's be good-natured and make the most of it. I love the kids that draw on their masks, that make special masks. They have Batman on their masks. They make the best of it.
I think that's great too. I agree, yeah.
I went out, I brought this along because I say, well, I have my color coordinated mask because that's my silly thing. The glasses, the mask. It makes me feel better. It makes me feel like I have some say and perk it up. I don't always want to wear those ugly sterile masks. So let's make the best of it and try to get the facts and be as cooperative and pleasant as we can and be mindful and say, let's just take it one day at a time. If COVID taught me anything, that really is the best way to fly through life, and that nothing will surprise us. Is there anything that we would hear about COVID that would surprise us? I don't think so. Not at this point, because we've been up, we've been down. So we just got to stay mentally flexible and adaptable.
I think that's perfect. And I think that's a great spot to end it. So that's going to do it for this episode of Dr. Mom. We will update everybody with our next episode, date and time soon. We're probably going to switch to live to mornings, 1 or 2 days a week. We're going to figure out how to work that. We think that conversations that have to do with mental health and human brain and all that fun stuff are more, they go better with your coffee. So we're going to talk about working that out. So more to come on that. But Mom, thank you very much. It is your show. Great job. We'll see everybody next time. Take care.
Take care. Get out there.
Is the Dr. Mom Podcast.